really. I thought that was mine. These headphones, they're good.
Okay.
Relatable content.
It says we're live.
Says we're live. I think you're on, Scad.
All right, we're on. We're on. Hello, everyone. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Welcome, everyone, to Legends of the Nightfort panel. Gonna have a great time today. We're gonna uncover some of the legends that are talked about in various parts of Song of Ice and Fire. And we have with us today, I'm Scad from Davos Fingers. We have BWord, we have Chase, and we have Lord Travis from the Thanatos podcast. You guys want to say anything about yourselves real quick?
Not really. No.
Say hi.
No. Hi.
All right.
Hi. I'm the Riddler on Twitter.
My name is Chase.
So, welcome, guys. This idea came from Chase while we were having a fun discussion with a few friends, and the idea came that maybe all of these scary stories that are told mean something and could come to fruition in some way in the coming story. The first idea actually came that maybe something would happen with the 79 Sentinels, that they could become whites or something. And from there, we just kind of evolved or devolved into more and more discussion about these legends, and thought it might make a fun panel. From the Night's King and the Blackgate and 79 Sentinels and lots of other stories. So in this panel, we're going to be exploring each of the many promising little bits of text that the Nightfort offers. We're going to explore them individually at first, just kind of recap them real quick. And then we'll talk about what we think any or all of them maybe might mean for the future of the series. So let's just jump in. We've kind of grouped them a little bit in different categories. And everybody will be weighing in with areas that they've kind of focused on. We're going to start, though, with ones that we called legends in history. So some of these are just stories that seem to present a sense of history and context to the broader series. They may not directly relate to individual characters or even come back to haunt the story in any way, but they set down context for everything that the story revolves around. So as we traverse into the depths, it's important to remember that this region of the wall has a lot of ancient history. For tens of thousands of years, this whole continent, specifically the north in this area, was embroiled with conflict. Wars with the children of the forest and the first men. After that, the others came, and the first men. Later, wildlings and the first men and Andals. There's just been war and conflict forever, and that's the reason the wall is there. And so all of this stuff is wrapped up in these kind of ancient conflicts for control of this kind of special, seemingly special magical area of Westeros. So we have in the current story really very few people too concerned about the wall. It's been falling into disrepair and such. We get from Stannis Baratheon one line of text: demons made of snow and ice and cold, the ancient enemy, the enemy that matters. And so that's one of the clear references we get to the fact that this is really kind of the important conflict in the story, even though much of the action happens elsewhere. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. We have these ancient wars that are all tied up in the creation of a wall, and probably in the generation of most of these legends. And if you hear my children wailing, that is not the 79 Sentinels awaking in the wall of ice. That is my 8 and 6-year-old who can't follow directions to be quiet. So the next one we have, which is really just a really quick one, is called Sherrod's Curse. And this is an interesting one because there's almost nothing about it. The quote is, "This was the castle where King Sherrod had called down his curse on the Andals of old." Honestly, that's all we get. Sherrod is not mentioned anywhere else in any way, in any text. But it is interesting that, this king, I assume he's a king of the first men. I don't know why he's calling down curses on the Andals. Seems strange. It hints that maybe it's one of those stories that maybe happened a little bit later, as the Andals didn't come into the story until 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. So anyway, that's one just kind of historical context situation. Did you have a note to add there, Travis?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that once we get to the Rat Cook, which is a very famous story from the Nightfort, famous legend in Westeros in the north, we're going to talk a little bit about the Andal King. So I kind of wonder if these two legends are somewhat related, since they specifically call out the Andals, which, as we said, the Nightfort is an ancient castle. The timeline is very iffy. So I think we can, when we get to the Rat Cook, maybe we can tie that in a little bit and theorize or speculate, perhaps, if these two are related.
Yeah, I'd love to hear how you relate them. I'll look forward to that, as will everyone listening. The next one we have on tap is the 79 Sentinels Chase. If you want to go ahead and kick us off there.
Yeah, this one, well, like Scott said, this was kind of how this got started. The thought originally came to me listening to one of the Davos Fingers episodes, and they were talking about whether the Nightfort has will have something to do with in-game, or with the wall coming down, I believe, in particular, is what Matt said. So, and that gave me the thought of this, the 79 Sentinels, which are, I'll just read the quote real quick, and then we'll move on, because there's lots more important things to talk about than this one. But it says, there are ghosts in here, Bran said. Hodor has heard all the stories before, but Jojen might not have. Old ghosts from before the old king, even before Aegon the Dragon. 79 deserters who went south to be outlaws. One was Lord Riswell's youngest son. So when he reached the Barrowlands, they sought shelter at his castle, but Lord Riswell took them captive and returned them to the Nightfort. And Lord Commander had holes hewn in the top of the wall and put the deserters in them and sealed them up alive in the ice. They have spears and horns, and they all face north. The 79 Sentinels, they're called. And that's the idea for this kind of came to me, as what if these wake up? We know that the others, raise the dead to be whites, and can this happen with these Sentinels inside of the wall and start chiseling out? And that's, that's really the whole story with with that.
On a particularly warm day, maybe the heads will be exposed.
Yeah. Well, the other bit of that story, of course, is that Lord Riswell, when he was old and dying, had himself carried to the Nightfort and took the Black to stand beside his son for honor's sake, which was perhaps something we'll talk about later on.
Yeah, there's some historical significance to this story as well. Travis, I know you had a note on that, just kind of about the dedication of the North to supplying men to the Night's Watch. Even the idea that the Riswells would behave in this way with their own kin, and kind of where the Night's Watch is today. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a reciprocal duty here. The Night's Watch, excuse me, the Night's Watch duty is to guard the realms of men. Obviously, that extends beyond just the Seven Kingdoms, as we all understand. But there's also a duty of the great houses, of the noble houses, of the Iron Throne, of all of these different leadership organizations to supply the Night's Watch. And that's something that we see in the main series has completely fallen off, that it's really a penal colony. People send prisoners there. People send, folks from different sects of the of society that really don't have another outlet, and they're just basically sent up there and left to fend for themselves in a way. And so I think that this, in a lot of ways, again, shows that reciprocal duty that the great houses have to supply the Night's Watch, to support the Night's Watch, to hold their laws and customs. We see that in the very first book, in the first chapter, Bran's first chapter of Ned carrying out a sentence on a Night's Watch deserter. I think also what's interesting to me, and we don't know the context of what time of year it was, if when Lord Riswell was dying, but it sort of illustrates the northern custom of when winter is coming, you go off to to die so other people can live and have enough supplies. Now, a lot of this is Lord Riswell probably regretting what happened to his family, regretting that he sent them back and that they were put into the wall. But I think there's a little bit of that flavor in there that, he's at the end of his life. And that's what the Northern custom really illustrates, when the older generation leaves so the younger generation can survive.
Yeah, they're all about self-sacrifice.
Mhm.
Yeah, and thematically, again, I think this all plays into the sense of history, right? These stories help us understand how this region, specifically the North, works and how beholden and reciprocal they are to the Watch, like you said, and yet sets up perhaps a dichotomy with the way it's working now, because you can see that the Night's Watch has fallen a little bit into disrepair, that maybe people aren't holding that vow in the North like they used to, or as stringently as they did. Certainly, we still see people coming, even Waymar down from the Royces, who also have a tie to the Watch, but maybe they're not doing so in the numbers they used to, or with the dedication they used to. And this story offsets that starkly. Not starkly, but starkly.
I feel like it. You have in the first chapters, Tyrion mocking Jon for thinking that the Night's Watch was a noble place, and Jon would never have thought otherwise, because I don't think most of the Starks think otherwise. The Night's Watch, despite what the South maybe has used it for as a penal colony, to the North or to the people who follow the old gods, it is still a noble place to be. It's a noble calling. You've mentioned Stark on the Wall. You have a Royce gone to the Wall. So in the North, it is still, to them, it still means something.
It does, for sure.
Yeah, I also wonder if perhaps, and again, a lot of these stories aren't one-to-one. We should never think about many of these legends as one-to-one. They're going to happen again in the main series. But, perhaps if Jorah Mormont survives the series, will he join the Night's Watch at the end, thinking about his father having served? I think that could be, just another little foreshadowing that perhaps with this legend entails for his end game.
All right, well, I think we've got a lot of these to cover. Unless somebody's got something else to jump in with, we'll move on. So we're going to move on to the next section here, which is we called it horror and fun. It's George's happy, fun horror time. Sometimes I think George just wants to play. He's like a really talented writer child in an old man's body, and he loves the horror genre. He loves it. So these next few may not have direct significance to the story exactly, but they let George add his flavor that make Song of Ice and Fire really what it is. The first one is Arson Ice Axe.
Yeah. So Arson Ice Axe here was kind of interesting. It's the first one that I thought of as not really having a lot of significance. The main reason is because part of it is, it's a Finn talking to Jon about it in Jon 3. Says, even as far as Finn, we know the tale of Arson Ice Axe and his tunnel. And basically Jon goes on to think about how the Arson Ice Axe was chipping his way through the wall, and he was found by Night's Watch from the Nightfort, and they didn't bother him. They just let him and just sealed him up and let him stay inside that hole. And of course, our man Dolores Ed used to say, if you had pressed your ear flat to the wall, you could still hear Arson Ice Axe chipping away. And we thought, my first thought is this just a scary story to tell the wildlings tell their children about the spooky Night's Watch and the Nightfort in particular?
Yeah, very much. Just like the stories Nan tells to Bran, or to borrow from some other stories, the legends of the Chandrian that keep people in check in the Kingkiller Chronicles, if you've read that series, or the troll tales told to Hobbit children to scare them and keep them in line. Always the goal to divert your children from the danger, and in this case, the wall. And I think, the wall is very much a lurking evil presence to wildlings, right? They feel like it's a subversive element to their living, and I think also it might speak to the Night's Watch as well, to how much faith they have in the wall. The wall will take care of this guy. Just seal him in. The wall will protect us.
Well, and I mean, with the the wildling children's, like you said, it's a really legit concern to be close to the wall, considering, I mean, how much evidence we have about how much the men of the Night's Watch absolutely hate the wildlings. You know, the vast majority of them, you know, and they stabbed John to death because of it, you know.
You have the 79 Sentinels, and then you have this guy, and all in all, you're just another ghost in the wall.
Like it.
Too.
Wow. Nice.
The next one we have is what I think is the most chilling of the stories. The Mad Axe, Travis.
Yeah, this is pure 70s, 80s slasher horror film dropped into Song of Ice and Fire. And I do think you're right, Scad, that George just loves all these different genres, and he just likes to drop kind of these stories in just to give it a flavor. And so this one really sets the tone, the mood, the darkness of the Nightfort. But we get this in Bran 4 in A Storm of Swords, which of course is the chapter where Bran and company are at the Nightfort. They're camping before they go through the wall. And here's the lines that we get. Mad Axe had once walked these yards and climbed these towers, butchering his brothers in the dark. That's Bran, he remembered what old Nan had said of Mad Axe, how he took his boots off and prowled the castle halls barefoot in the dark, with never a sound to tell you where he was, except for the drops of blood that fell from his axe and his elbows and the end of his wet red beard. I just love that. I love that story.
What was it wet with, you think, that was red? What could it be?
I think it's clearly
that
blood.
was kind of funny how it was funny how we all had kind of different ideas of what that meant. Like some of us picture him as a redhead who with red hair dripping with blood, or did he have blonde hair and he's dripping red with blood?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Chase is right. I mean, when we were talking about this, I think two of us were like, "Oh, he's a ginger. He has red hair," and the other two were like, "I think it's blood." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah."
Yeah, I don't know why. I always pictured him as this just very hirsute, dark bearded, like long, almost like Blackbeard, like a pirate or something, or or Bluebeard, or I don't know, one of those beards. But just he's killed so much, he's just dripping in blood, and the only sound he makes is the blood dripping on the ground.
The campsite story is, to me, it's like
Yes.
campsite story. It's, you know, the two people are making out in the car, and the guy tells the scary story about the drip, drip, drip from the drops, and then they hear it, and then they die too. Like that's the This is the Song of Ice and Fire equivalent to that story.
It's Friday the 13th. Absolutely. This is like the first Friday the 13th. Young kids doing something they shouldn't be out at a campground along the lake. Yeah, you hear that. Yeah, that's pretty good.
The guy went around the back of the car to get the beers, right? Yeah. And shuts the door, and the girl's just there waiting for him to get back, and then she hears the dripping on the top of the hood or something. Yeah. Totally.
Well, even one of the things that, and this just came to mind, but we know that the wall weeps, that it drips occasionally. You could see this story starting off as a campfire story at the Nightfort of some brothers sitting around, and they hear that dripping, and someone just kind of makes up this story, and people
adds the detail.
Yeah, huddling closer and closer and closer to the fire, scared. Oh, there he comes! There he comes.
Stories grow in the telling, and it also, as you put it that way, with the Night's Watch maybe telling this story to each other, it's a bit of a cautionary tale. Also, just like Arson Ice Axe, but for a different audience. Of the Night's Watch to each other. Hey, watch each other. Make sure we're all okay, or this could happen, right?
But it's like exactly Bran is doing this story to himself, right? He's in there and he's thinking of this story and the scary story, and then he starts to hear something coming up. So like it all comes back around, right? It's there to be a scary story, and it gets in your head, and then for Bran, a 9-year-old kid, it's here, he's here, he's coming to get me.
He's thinking this whole thing, if anyone's forgotten, he's thinking about this story the whole time. The sounds of Sam creeping up the well are getting closer and closer and closer, and he's imagining being Mad Axe, and it's very effective and chilling. A great part. If there's nothing else, we can move on to the Prentice Boys, which is also chilling in a different way to me.
Yeah. So the quote on this, um, from Brand 4, Stormers of Swords. Uh, Maybe it was the thing that came in the night. This is Bran hearing noises. The Prentice boys all saw it, Old Nan said, but afterward, when they told their Lord Commander, every description had been different. And 3 died within a year, and the 4th went mad. I wonder if maybe that's Maddox. And 100 years later, when the thing had come again, the Prentice boys were seen shambling along behind it, all in chains. I know I looked around a lot to try to find examples of this kind of thing in the actual or folklore, and like I said, there's lots and lots of shapeshifters out there. Particularly when you start looking for this stuff, you find lots of D&D stuff, but really I couldn't find anything that had like at least everyone's perception of it was completely different. So I've got, I'm kind of stumped for what this thing that comes in the night is.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like a concept I've heard before, even a lot of times, like that everyone experiences this horror differently. The only thing I could come up with was Bird Box, the smash Netflix hit from a year or two ago, where everyone seemed to experience the terror that they were seeing differently. It's never really described, but it seems like everyone's kind of worst fear drives them nuts.
It's a boggart for sure. Has to be.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
I assume that's a Harry Potter thing.
Of course.
Someday I'll read those books.
For shame.
I know. All right, we're moving on to the next section. This is relatable to the content, is this section. So some of these stories, they seem to play much more directly, or thematically at least, with other characters in Song of Ice and Fire. We'll explore some of those stories here and how they relate to those characters and the storyline at large and what they might mean for the future. And first one here is Danny Flint, a fun one.
Yeah, so sing us the song of brave Danny Flint, a song to make everyone weep. While we've yet to hear the actual song, tales say she was young and brave, a woman who wanted to join the Night's Watch. Danny pretended to be a boy and once discovered she was raped and murdered at the Nightfort. The story is brought up a few times, most notably perhaps at the wedding of Ramsay Bolton and Arya Stark by Wyman Manderly, who, as we'll get to, has just carried out another tale of the Nightfort. And I wonder if he requested this song because he was aware of a pretender among them. Jane obviously pretending to be Arya. What do you guys think?
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of stories of people, women in this series kind of taking on other roles and frequently being punished for it and not being accepted. Fake Arya doesn't even want to be doing it, and she's being punished for it. We don't know why Danny wanted to join the Night's Watch, but clearly it was, again, is it a cautionary tale as well? This is why we don't do it. We have interesting right now. We have women at the Wall that John has brought in to be a part of their defense, and it's the first time they've been there in a long, long time, maybe since Danny. Mm-hmm. And they've been gifted their own castle garrison, which is a smart move, not kind of mixing them with the men probably. But several Night's Watch members are showing grave concern about bringing them in. Danny Flint being, I guess, a reminder maybe to us, the reader, of what maybe happens when women are brought to the Wall, as terrible as that is.
Well, over and over again in the story, they're just constantly referred to as rapers at the Wall.
Yes. Yep. But yeah, I mean, specific examples, Arya, pretending to be a boy. You have certainly Brienne not pretending to be a boy in any way, but certainly taking on that knight visage and role and doing her very best to be that role and being just chided for it left and right. A little bit different. She's not in hiding, but I think these play thematic. This plays very directly thematically with lots of characters.
Mm-hmm. I wonder too if it has any tie to Sorella, who is, pretending to be a boy in Old Town at an all boys club. I mean, certainly I don't expect that the same brutality would happen in Old Town, but we don't
Those
know.
maesters are ruthless in a different way, but that's a great comparison. I love that one.
Yeah.
And any other thoughts on brave Danny Flint?
Yeah, we don't really know her reasons for joining the Night's Watch in the first place or what her family thought of it at all. But it is important, I think, to remember that she was not a simple commoner, but a Flint of the North. We don't know whether she was avenged or if all she received in the end was courage. Excuse me. All she received in the end for her courage was a sad and pretty song. So,
Better than most of us get, I suppose.
true.
In the end. Should we move on to the Rat Cook?
All right, the Rat Cook. I think one of the most famous legends from the Nightfort. Of course, first and foremost, we get this in Brand 4 in A Storm of Swords, but we hear about it in a couple other chapters, The Prince of Winterfell and A Dance with Dragons, and of course, in the chapter on the North in the World Book. So, as you said, Scad, as we've talked about here, every little noise that Bran hears at the Nightfort, he associates it with one of the legends he's heard, one of the stories he's heard. And that's most prominent because the Rat Cook is the most prominent because the Nightfort is just infested with rats. There are rats everywhere. So when they finally decide to camp in the kitchens and they're building a fire, I just want to read the passage because I think it's just so good and it really draws out some of the foreshadowing and relevant points to some other things that happen in the story. When the flames were blazing nicely, Mira put the fish on. At least it's not a meat pie. The Rat Cook had cooked the son of the Andal King in a big pie with onions, carrots, mushrooms, lots of pepper and salt, a rasher of bacon, and a dark red Dornish wine. Then he served him to his father, who praised the taste and had a second slice. Afterward, the gods transformed the cook into a monstrous white rat, who could only eat his own young. He had roamed the Nightfort ever since, devouring his children, but still his hunger was not sated. So we know from the World Book that the Rat Cook was just a simple cook at the Nightfort, who, as we said before, killed an Andal King's son, baked the prince into a pie, and served it to the king for some wrong the king did to the Rat Cook. We don't know what that wrong was. So in my mind, there are really three purposes for this story. One, it's to convey a parable that explains really the kind of earth-shattering of social norms that the phrase did with the Red Wedding, with breaking guest right. And of course, this chapter happens just 5 from Catelyn 7, where the Red Wedding occurs. So I think this is George adding this parable to point out that, the Rat Cook wasn't killed or wasn't punished because of revenge or cannibalism or murder even. It's because he broke guest right. A guest was beneath his roof and he betrayed that ancient custom. The second part is to lay the groundwork for Frey pies, which we see happen in A Dance with Dragons. And that's why we hear about Lord Wyman Manderley, who is one of the best minor characters in my opinion. We hear him call out, and he's obviously very drunk because he's just enjoying feeding these Freys to the Boltons and Freys at Ramsay's wedding feast. And he's calling out for Abel Mance to sing the song of the Rat Cook. And if you read that passage from A Dance with Dragons, the ingredients are very similar. Now, you could step back and say, well, most meat pies are going to have the same type of ingredients. But George almost lists them in the exact order. Really, the only difference is the Rat Cook's pie has bacon, Wyman's has pork. So, take that for what you will. But I think that's George illustrating that these are two very similar things. And then finally, the third one, I think this foreshadows what's going to happen to House Frey. That they begin to consume themselves, that their breaking of guest right punishes them both in society of Westeros and in if there are gods, in a supernatural way, to where they are just going to begin consuming themselves and destroying themselves from within. And you see that already. I mean, the Freys are constantly thinking about, if old Walter dies, who's next in line? And then they basically keep plotting to kill each other. And I think that's just a domino that will keep going on. And I think that really illustrates that George believes there are repercussions, and that this is a major taboo in his world that he's built, that it's not just about breaking the laws of society, the laws of hospitality, but sheltering someone, bringing someone into your home, giving them food, giving them wine, giving them a warm fire, is sort of a protection against winter and death. And that's what's really important in Westeros when winter is coming, for people to be welcomed and to have a safe place. And, no matter your personal grievances, it's George makes it very clear this is an awful thing to do. So I think those are the three reasons George puts this story in there.
I'm going to go back to your second one real quick, just because I want to highlight it a little, because I just love George and his method of storytelling so much. What you could have in the hands of a lesser author is someone, without setting up the Rat Cook story before, having to detail this path of Wyman cooking these Freys into the pies to get this revenge. And instead, what you have is a chilling tale of horror told through a child's eyes earlier in the books, and simply references to that same story to highlight what's happening and letting the reader bring it to themselves. And it's so effective, and we should all, I know we do, but we should bow at the throne of George. Anything else on the Rat Cook? I know there's a lot there. Anything to add?
Well, I just had a thought when he was talking about it, about we don't know why the Rat Cook had a grudge against this Andal king or prince, but we know if the Andal kings and princes are anything like Targaryen princes, they've deserved it.
Yeah, the whole I don't want to go into it because it's a big diversion probably, but the whole idea that there's an Andal king there at all is weird. The Andals never conquered the North. They have no business really at the Wall. They kind of bred into the North eventually, right, over the thousands of years, but I don't know why an Andal king would even be there. It's strange, but let's maybe a time for another panel next year. We can cover that.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, Scad, that's really all I had on the tie between King Sherrod's curse and this, that just the fact that they both call out the Andals, and the Andals are, we don't know when this legend happens, but why was an Andal king there? Is that the link there? I think it's just very interesting and definitely deserves more detective work. Or,
George picked out a weed and misspoke and gardened around it, and here we are.
Well,
so,
they could be the same curse. I mean, they both are an Andal king. They both are a curse. It could be the same story, and then
that's true. Yes,
telephone. They've broken it up and made it something else. And I will say, and we'll leave it at this if you want, Scad, but the reason that the Andal king may have been there in the first place could just be as simple as an invitation for a call for men to help man the wall.
Could have been.
True.
Yeah. Again, the timing of all of this stuff is speculative, right? We don't know when it happened, what conflicts may have been occurring, and why there might have been need for men. It's all, totally true. Okay, we're going to move on to Simeon Star Eyes, which, again, I got all the short ones. Lucky me. From the Age of Heroes, this guy, we don't know where he was from. Probably the North because he was at the Wall, but we don't really know. But he was blind. He was a blind knight, even though knighthood didn't exist when he was living. He had a blade, or a staff with a blade on both ends, and he could twirl it around and chop multiple enemies at once. Kind of like Darth Maul before the lightsaber was invented. And then he ended up putting star sapphires in the sockets of his eyes, according to the singers. And he could see with it. And we know that because later it says that he saw hellhounds at the Nightfort, which is why this is a Nightfort tale. But he's also, this is relatable content to Bran, because what happens when Bran loses the power of his legs is that he's still very much looking for ways to contribute, specifically still to hold on to that dream of being a knight. And when he is being carried around by Hodor, he thinks perhaps he could learn to fight Master Blaster style and be effective. And Maester Luwin is trying to gently let him down that's not likely, that fighters need to have complete control over their bodies and coordination, and Bran very much relates to Simeon Starrise being someone that's lost some of the powers that he should have and can still be effective. The other way that Bran ends up relating to this later is that this is a man that's blind and can see, and Bran has been given extra sight from the three-eyed crow. We're likely meant to kind of pair these things together a little bit. This whole thing smacks of a legend a bit. Putting sapphires in your eyes sounds like a good waste of sapphires, really. But maybe the key is, what this means to Bran. And, it's very relatable to him. There's a little bit more we'll get to with Simeon Starrise later that we'll leave for the foreshadowing component, but that's his story.
Huge shout out to Scad for a Master Blaster reference.
Just came to me just while I was doing it.
Thank you for that.
Beth, do you have a note you wanted to?
Well, I don't know that sapphires were just a waste of money to throw in his eye sockets. Even in, George may have gotten the inspiration from ancient Greeks associated sapphire with Apollo. Petitioners often wore the gem while consulting oracles such as the one at the Delphi. Supposedly, sapphire taps the power of the third eye and makes clear ocular pronouncements otherwise too difficult to hear or understand. Necromancers sought the stone for its purported ability to influence spirits. So he probably did draw from sort of real world mythology and history.
Yeah, and we've talked before about how a lot of these things cycle, and we're probably not going to cover it here. I don't think we'll get there, but we talked pre-stream about the fact that some of these roles may be cyclical, like Bloodraven, then Bran was someone before Bloodraven. Maybe Simeon Starrise was one of these seers, a three-eyed crow before Bloodraven, and had this similar gift, right? We don't know. That's wild speculation, obviously. A great find there, Beth, on the
Yoke Boy brings up in the chat there something I don't know why we hadn't thought of. He says not sapphire, it's white ice. So could he be similar to like a Cold Hands, where some kind of not living, not dead thing.
Wait until you see the whites of their eyes.
Ayo.
All right. Let's move on. The next section is foreshadowing for future books. So we've moved a little slower than I think anyone would have liked, but probably could have predicted. But here we are to, I think, what is the real meat. These are some legends that we think could play directly in the coming story of A Song of Ice and Fire. George has carefully laid some groundwork that may be foreshadowing what is to come. We've got a quick hit back to the 79 Sentinels chase.
So because this is a story that is about Rizwells, there's quite a few of them running around in the current stories, most prominently Barbary Dustin and her father and three brothers. Is this story indicative of them going forward into the future? Do they have what did you say about it, Travis?
Reciprocal duty.
Yes, reciprocal duty. That's the thing. Is their story about honor? Are they going to be back up at the Nightfort, or are they going to have anything to do with, the end of the story at all? I personally, I expect them, just because they're in the room so often when all of these discussions are going down about the murders happening in Winterfell. There's always one of these Rizwells there with the Freys and with Roose Bolton and Lady Dustin. So I expect them to, have a role to play, at least probably very early in Winds of Winter. I'm not sure what it is. Do you have any thoughts?
No, not that I can, not that I can bring too much importance with, but just the fact that they may be at the wall for any number of reasons and be struck by this legend from their family and have it somehow impact their decision making, inspire them with honor so that they switch sides, or who knows.
That, or will these things wake up and chisel their way out of the wall, right?
And take their revenge on their old family.
Yeah, and be scary as hell.
You've got to rise. Well, look about you. All right, let's move on then. We'll go to the Night's King, and that's you, Beth.
The Night's King. According to legend, the Night's King was a fearless warrior and thus chosen as the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Later, he fell in love with a woman with skin as white as the moon, eyes like blue stars, and skin as cold as ice. When he gave his seed to her, he gave his soul as well. The Night's King brought her back to the Nightfort, and after their unholy union, he declared himself king and her his queen. They ruled the Nightfort for 13 years. Eventually, the King of Winter and Joromin, the King Beyond the Wall, joined forces to vanquish the Night's King and free the Night's Watch. After his fall, it was discovered the Night's King had been making sacrifices to the others. All records of him were destroyed, and his very name was forbidden and forgotten. The Night's King is said to have been a Magnar of Skagos, a Bolton, Woodfoot, Umber, Flint, Nori, or, according to Old Nan, a Stark named Brandon, and a brother to the King of Winter who brought him down. This is possibly what led the Northern Lords to forbid the Night's Watch to construct walls to the south of the castles built along the wall. But it made me wonder if it's also possible that the vows of the Night's Watch were amended after the rule of the Night's King to include, I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children, I shall wear no crowns, and win no glory. What do you guys think?
I think it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
And I think we may touch some on that in the Blackgate discussion as well,
Mm-hmm.
with vows and what they mean and do, the effect they have. But yeah, it makes sense. I mean, was this guy an oathbreaker himself already, and they were already there, and he just said, "Nah, I'm doing it anyway," or was it not a law? And so he was, and they're like, "Yeah, we need to make that a law."
Yeah.
Yeah, could be.
I think Travis has some thoughts too on the Night's King and there might be a story to play out within the story.
Yeah. So just to jump off your point first, if we talked about this on the planning stream, if the Night's King evolved into a legend, a legend of him being related to the others or working with the others or whatever, he could have started out just as a brother who was trying to usurp power, who was trying to take over a plot of land, who was trying to create a kingdom, something like that. So I definitely think that that's quite possible, and I think that's a really potential catch there, Beth. That maybe the Night's Watch vows were either started or were updated, amended based on, hey, this guy's trying to take a family and trying to create a line, and we can't have that happen here. So I think that's really good. That's a really good point that could be true to history. I just wanted to point out a couple folks in the main series that I think either have some Night King parallels or could potentially be a Night King. And I say Night King, I'm sorry, the show is infecting my brain. But could potentially be Night's King like in the story. So I think the first candidate is definitely Stannis Baratheon. I think that there's a lot of parallels between him and the Night's King. You have the fact that if the Night's King was a younger Stark, Stannis being the younger of the Baratheons, both of them having a sorceress come to them, a sorceress of ice, a sorceress of fire, if you will, with Melisandre. There's parallels between Dragonstone and the Nightfort even. I mean, you can imagine... I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I just said, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can imagine Stannis, in his castle in Dragonstone, knowing everything that's happened in King's Landing and not able to do anything about it. And here comes Melisandre to win him over. You can kind of see that parallel of the Night's King sitting in the Nightfort, and here comes this sorceress, this other, whatever she is. The only thing there is, the Nightfort legend, the sacrificing, all of that happens at the Nightfort grows. It develops over thousands and thousands of years. It didn't probably start off as this really awful, grotesque place. Dragonstone does. It's shaped by the Valyrians. It's a awful looking castle. It's when we visit there the first time in Clash of Kings in the prologue, you're thinking of like a Dark Lord sitting on his dark throne, surrounded by gargoyles and stuff. And there's just an aesthetic there that seems different that the Nightfort probably didn't originally have. I also think that the sacrifice of Shireen could be a parallel to the Night's King and the Night's Queen sacrificing to the others. Obviously, they're being sacrificed to different gods, if you will. I mean, potentially, we don't know yet if R'hllor and the others are related or whatever. But I think where this comparison sort of fails is the fact that just like Stannis is a failed Azor Ahai figure, he's probably going to be, therefore, a failed Night's King figure. And that's why I think Euron Greyjoy is probably the much stronger parallel, who potentially could be a very successful Night's King-like figure. I mean, depending on what he's going to do in Old Town, depending on where his arc goes through the rest of the series, it seems to most people that he's being set up as one of the final antagonists of the series. And I think what really draws out this comparison is the fact that, and if you haven't read it, I apologize, but I'm not going to read it verbatim, but the Forsaken, the sample chapter from the Winds of Winter, kind of draws out the fact that, Aeron Greyjoy, who's being forcibly consuming Shade of the Evening, dreams of Euron as this beast, this kraken with all these arms on the Iron Throne. But standing beside him, it says, beside him stood a shadow in woman's form, long and tall and terrible, her hands alive with pale white fire. The others are described as shadows moving in the woods. What is pale fire but ice in George's world, in my opinion? That to me really has echoes of a Night's Queen-like figure standing beside him. Additionally, one small tidbit that definitely deserves more inquiry from the fandom, and I think poor Quentin has talked some about this, is the fact that there's a character in A Clash of Kings called Urathon Nightwalker, who's in Karth, and it says after Dany has burned down the House of the Undying, the glass candles in his mansion are burning, something like that. The glass candles in his castles are burning, and they haven't burned in 100 years. Urathon Nightwalker to me sounds a lot like Euron Night's King, something like that. I just think that there's a lot of evidence there that potentially Euron could emerge as a Night's King-like figure in the final part of the series.
And the way you put that, a Night's King-like figure, is important. I don't think any of us are saying there will be a Night's King, but really what we're talking about is some sort of either aggressive action to gain power, or
Yes.
desperate act to complete a destiny, like Stannis may feel he has. Some motivator deep within someone that could force them to make a pact, commit a sacrifice, do something that would assist the others and create a Night's King-like role that upsets the balance at the wall. I think that's what we're really talking about as a possibility. And it feels like there's some setup for that. As Travis has. Go ahead, sorry.
To bring these themes back around, right, from history to current story. I wonder if, and we might touch on this maybe more later, but the idea of Stannis burning Shireen at the Night's Fort as a gift to R'hllor might upset things at the Nightfort, which is so clearly a First Men Old God place.
And in the end, I bet he gets nothing of it, and he will be Rick R'hllor.
Yep.
No, nothing. All right. We're gonna move on to.
Well,
I
it
was,
just
on mute.
sorry.
I was on mute while I was laughing hysterically.
Oh.
Sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead.
I was just
Kyle.
going to say one other point that I think it bears mentioning is that the way the Night's King is taken down is a unity of the North, the King of Winter, and the free folk, the wildlings. If you kind of expand that a little farther, that the realm unites both those folks beyond the wall and those folks south of the wall to take down the Night's King. You know, maybe that again is what matters in this story, is that people come together, putting aside their differences to stop the end times, to stop the apocalypse.
Yeah.
I think that that's another good point to make here.
Yes, absolutely. That's what stopped the first Night's King, and maybe similarly, that's what will be needed this time as well. Okay, quick revisit of Simeon Star Eyes before we move to the kind of the main event. Simeon Star Eyes we've talked about already, but it's noted that he visited the Nightfort where he saw hellhounds fighting. And this is really only important because of what we're about to talk about with the Black Gate, in that hellhounds sometimes, they're dogs frequently with many heads. They're used throughout mythology and other stories. And frequently they're used to guard the entrance to the dead. They are also considered bearers of death. And so having them at the Nightfort is a little bit of a sign toward what we're going to talk about here in the Black Gate section. So it's like, I guess, just a little teaser for Travis to dive right into his section.
Yes, the Black Gate. There's a lot of information here. There's a lot of potential symbolism and foreshadowing here. And I really look forward to talking with you all about it. So again, Bran 4, Storm of Swords. We'd like to talk about the fact that Bran here knows all these legends. He's heard all these stories. He's scared of everything that goes bump in the night. And then at the end of this chapter, they literally descend down to this true supernatural power that's embedded at the bottom of the Nightfort, at the bottom of the well, connecting into the wall. It's just such a great ending to the chapter, and George does it so well. So, you know, just to jump out and say, you immediately think of, or I do as a fan of Lord of the Rings, the Black Gate of Mordor. It's kind of, I think, where George picks the name from. But it's so different than that, because the Black Gate refers to, it's not black at all. It refers to, it's a gate for the Night's Watch. That's why it's called the Black Gate, because Black brothers can only access it, use it, etc. We'll talk a lot more about that here in just a minute. So, you know, Bran has had these visions that they have to go to the Nightfort. But when they get there, the tunnel is sealed. There's no way through. They definitely can't climb the top of the wall and then descend down. But when Sam finally comes out of the darkness and begins talking to them, he reveals that there's a gate. It's cold, and it leads to the other side of the wall, which is even colder. Only a brother of the Night's Watch can find it, and only a brother of the Night's Watch can open it. Someone who said the vow, Sam says. We learn from Sam and Gilly that Cold Hands led them to wherever the gate comes out, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But we know that, you know, something that's dead, something that's resurrected or whatever, can't pass through the gate, can't pass beyond the power of the wall. So Sam leads them down and down and down these descending stairs in the well from the kitchen of the Nightfort. When they get to the bottom, Bran notices that several feet down, steps down, all of a sudden there's this gate, and it's not black at all. It's white, it's glowing. And the quote goes, "It was a white weirwood, and there was a face on it. A glow came from the wood like milk and moonlight. So faint it scarcely seemed to touch anything beyond the door itself. Not even Sam standing right before it. The face was old and pale, wrinkled and shrunken. It looks dead. Its mouth was closed, and its eyes. Its cheeks were sunken, its brow withered, its chin sagging. If a man could live for 1,000 years and never die, but just grow older, his face might look like that. The door opened its eyes. They were white too, and blind. Looks like Bloodraven, I think. And I wonder if when Bran gets to Bloodraven's cave in A Dance with Dragons, is he going to start thinking that? Because when he sees Bloodraven, the description sounds a little similar. And of course, that goes to, does the three-eyed crow use the faces, or do the faces look like the three-eyed crow? Well, we can talk a little bit about that maybe too if we have time. But the door asks, "Who are you?" And Sam recites the words of the Night's Watch oath. "Then pass," the door said. Its lips opened, wider and wider and wider still, until nothing at all remained but a great gaping mouth and a ring of wrinkles. Sam steps aside and waves Bran and company through, each of them passing easily through the opening. But Hodor is huge, and he doesn't duck low enough. And the chapter ends with this. The door's upper lip brushed softly against the top of Bran's head, and a drop of water fell on him and ran slowly down his nose. It was strangely warm and salty as a tear. I love the ending of that. It occurs to me that it's really important the way this chapter begins. And it really relates to all of these stories and legends that we've talked about today. It starts with Mira saying, "It's just another empty castle." And Bran thinks to himself, "It is the Nightfort, and this is the end of the world." What is the end of the world but death? The Nightfort to me is a lot of the wonder and terror in A Song of Ice and Fire. As Melisandre thinks, this is really a hinge of the world. The Black Gate itself, the Nightfort, the wall, all of these things, but specifically the Black Gate is really a threshold to another world, another realm, another dimension even. I mean, if you think about this, and Beth said this on our planning stream, this is the wardrobe in the Chronicles of Narnia. This is the rabbit hole in Alice's adventure in Wonderland. Like when you cross this threshold, you're going into a completely new world. This is part of the hero's journey. You cross the threshold, you don't come back the same. And I think that that's really important and something that George does so well here, with making it clear that once you step over this line, things change.
Yeah, and it's just continuing that story. It's a gate with a toll. You got to pay the ferryman your coin. In this case, the coin is the oath to get through. And again, back to those hellhounds. It's not just guarding a door. It's guarding a gate to a land of death, to a different world, a very different world. Like you said, the end of the world, as Bran's at the beginning of the chapter. Yeah. And we had a comment from Samir, I believe it was, in the chat, just saying that they love it just because it's 100% magic. And I agree. Yes. So much of the magic in this story is subtle and a bit of a tease. It's a promise for future magic. And you'll see later and things like that. Melisandre, a lot of her magic is fake, even though clearly she has some power also. And this is just straight up fantasy magic. Yes. And it is perhaps, the thing that ties these two different worlds together, this one gate, this one place in the wall where you can get through in this strange way. And just to talk about that for a second, only certain people can even find the gate. It's said in the chapter, Bran is talking about just his little group going down to go through the gate. And Sam says, this is paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact quote now, but he says, "You won't find it. Or if you do, you won't be able to open it." So it's almost like the gate moves or isn't there all the time or is somehow triggered by something else to be there. And, we're still on the south side of the wall here at the Nightfort. When it opens, is it a portal? What happens?
I think
Just land on the other side like Narnia?
Yeah, I think portal is the best term for it, because the glowing to me, it seems like that's when it activates. And does it activate in the presence of Sam because he's a black brother? It turns on, but let's also not think of this as a gate. Let's not think of this as a door. Anything. Walking out a door in your house, walking through a gate to a castle. Don't think of it like that. This is a mouth. This is the mouth on the weirwood tree. The weirwood tree that's bursting up through the floor of the kitchens of the Nightfort and going out through the domed roof. This is that tree, because the tree itself is not coming up through the well. It's coming up through the floor beside the well. And as they descend down, this is when Bran gets to the Nightfort and sees the weirwood tree, he notes there's no face on this tree. It's not like the one in Winterfell. Yes, there is. It's at the bottom of this. And the way they pass through is, again, not through a gate, not through a door. The mouth just opens, and it swallows them whole. I mean, literally swallows them whole in order to pass through. And one of the really cool lines that George adds there is Bran remembers, and this is pretty early in the chapter, Bran remembers that something that Maester Luwin had told him. Maester Luwin always said that old Nan's stories shouldn't be swallowed whole.
And yet here he is.
He's
Bran
here.
Has become one of Nan's stories. And he is about to be swallowed whole by this gate.
Yes.
He is living one of these stories now. He has become one of them and will be swallowed whole by this gate.
Yeah.
I do also. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask for more.
I do. I like. I shared a parallel as they're leaving Winterfell with Maester Luwin by the weirwood, and obviously he's bleeding into the ground there, and he's dying. I beg the Maester swallowed a drink of water and another boon, if you would. She turned to Mira. Take the boys. Jojen and Mira led Rickon out between them. Hodor followed. Low branches whipped at Bran's face as they pushed between the trees, and the leaves brushed away his tears. It reminds me so much of that part of, it's like tears and trees and Bran, they all come around and come back around for him. And they're both major parts in the transition through his story, right? He's leaving his home for the first time. He's lost his I guess, second critical teacher. And then as he goes through the gate, he's moving towards his third, Ned and Luwin, and now Bloodraven. So, little tidbit I liked.
Yep, that your comparison there reminded me of one of the things we talked a little bit about pre-stream, which is, well, I'm sure it's hogwash, but I speculated, maybe the triggering of that gate has to do not just with the words, but there being someone on the other side keeping that gate open, Bloodraven in this case, and that is in fact a cyclical role. There always needs to be somebody in that role, being able to trigger that, and that yes, Bloodraven was also involved with that tree, brushing Bran as he walked away. As we know, he's probably.
So, are you saying the voice that comes from the tree may not be just some magical entity other than it's just Bloodraven?
Well, I want to be very clear that I don't know what I'm talking about. I think it's a fun idea, but it has not been researched or really looked at. But it's something I thought about. Yeah.
Or is Cold Hands the keeper of the gate?
Or Cold Hands could be the keeper of the gate.
Because he is, I believe, he's a black brother. He was wearing black, and he's the one who tends to be the person to bring passage through. So.
Another thing we had talked about when we were talking about this is we know roughly where this tree is, right? It's coming out of the roof of the kitchen, and they go down and through the tunnels and they find it. And we talked about, well, you find this door and it seems like bang, they're stepping through the other side of the wall now, and that comes back to what we were saying before, it being like a portal. Are you following this down a tunnel that actually leads you to a door that sits on just on the other side of the wall, or are you, 500 feet this way and open up this portal and bang, you're popping out on the other side of the wall.
In which case,
Yeah.
how does Cold Hands find the entryway on the other side? What is it? Does he just knock on the ice? Or it's another magic werewood tree portal somewhere on the other side?
But it's like you said, it's truly magic.
Yeah, true magic. Do you guys have anything else here? Do you want to get to like maybe some speculation about what the Blackgate role could be in the remaining series before we tie up? I know we're over time, but people are sticking with us, and Tara said you can go a few minutes over. So you speculate a little bit about what the Blackgate might bring.
Well, I mean, is it the way, the dead are going to pass through the wall, I guess, is, are they going to figure out a way through this gate, or no, or is the magic with it on it too good?
It's too good.
I think for that to have happened, I think you would need. I'm with Beth. I don't think so. But for that to happen, I think you would need some sort of Knights King level sacrifice or deal or soul offering or something to break that magic. A Knight's brother breaking his vows at the gate or something akin to that to break the magic and allow somebody through. But I kind of don't think so. But could be.
Can I talk about for a second about the vows and the words that I have here?
Yeah.
So I mentioned in the that the vows were possibly changed after the reign of the Night King, and I wonder if the old vows could be the words that Sam used to open the gate, like just that simple sentiment that he uses. And this also leads me to wonder if Sam, having said his words before the heart tree, has any relevance. If he had said them in a sept, would he have still been able to open the gate? Like, we do know that there was another gate at the Nightfort. They mentioned that it was sealed up when the castle was abandoned. So did they forget about the gate? Did it stop working? Did it stop working because new men who didn't follow the old gods or swear before a heart tree weren't, like, they were there and it would work open for them? What do we think?
There's so much there to unpack. So perhaps they thought that gate was closed. The people that went down there happened to be worshippers of the Seven, and when they tried, it didn't work. And they were like, "Okay, this thing's broken. I guess we don't need to worry about that." And
maybe
only a handful of them tried it, and they gave up. The odds aren't with it, since most of the people that are at the wall are from the north and probably worshiping the heart trees. But it's possible.
But most of the men, like in John's time, John and Sam are the only ones who try to take they opt to say their words before a heart tree. So maybe not, right?
Depends on how recently we're talking about.
Yeah.
And when they sealed it up and stuff. And I don't know that. Do we know that when they sealed it up? I don't think we do.
Well, through the story, is Yoren the only one who's out on like doing rounds through the country to pull recruits from dungeons, or do they have another? They have like is it rotating?
They get streams from other places, but it's mostly Yoren doing the rounds, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm just curious. Do we have now a more disproportionate amount since it's mostly for criminals? You might have like younger sons from the north and old first men houses in the Vale maybe, but probably most of the recruits are southerners coming from dungeons in the south. Yeah,
it seems like that, especially with John in Game of Thrones training. It seems like he's one of the few castle-born nobles that is there, beyond obviously Waymar Royce, who dies in the prologue. But it seems like the rest are just your small folk who, for being small folk, they get sent there.
Socioeconomics being what they are.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that something's going to happen at the Nightfort. We have Celise on her way there. If she's not there already, I've forgotten.
Builders are there,
rebuilding it. All of these stories, something's going to happen. I know, Beth, I think you mentioned pre-stream that I can't remember whose theory it was now about the hold the door scene that I don't know anything about.
Oh yes, that's Radio Westeros has a neat theory. Shout out to Lady Gwenna Yokeboy if you're in the chat. I'm not following, but I hope you are. But they had a theory that the infamous hold the door moment from the show Taboo will actually be at the Black Gate, as it's the only door that we have sort of beyond the wall. And the magic there could be what, who knows, but anyway, could be what destroys Hodor's mind. Who knows? Like in the show, they frame it as, a lot of people call him Bran the Ruiner after because of what it wound up being. But what if it's not that? What if it was just the magic of the gate closing in on Hodor, but he always knew it was going to happen? I don't know. Anyway, it is a really neat theory to me, though.
Yeah,
it's
very good, Travis.
I was going to say it seems hard to be able to hold this door. Again, we don't know where it exits. We don't know if there's a tunnel. We don't know if there's a second door. And back to our earlier point that this is pure magic, and I almost kind of wish that it doesn't that hold the door doesn't happen here or anything like that. Just so we in a way don't get any more information of how the system works. That it remains one of those elusive mysteries of the series. Plus, are the others going to attack the Nightfort? Are they going to attack Castle Black? Are they going to attack East? I mean, it's just a jumble in my mind of like, where are they actually going to attack? Or does it matter where they attack? Because back to Euron as the Night's King, if he blows the Horn of Winter and that's what breaks the wall's power, does it matter now? Does all this stuff go away? This is a question just popped in my mind. Is the Black Gate powered by the wall, or is it a more ancient power of the old gods because it's the Weirwood Tree?
Yeah, as part of the hinge of the world there.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Chicken or egg kind of a thing. I mean, yeah.
Well, if you didn't have the wall, you wouldn't need the gate through it.
Right. No, not that the gate was there, maybe, but perhaps that there was magic in the area, in that region, powering kind of all of this conflict and all of these things. And they built a wall in that spot because of that, and the gate being a part of it. But yeah, I don't think we know. I think unless we have anything more profound to add, we should probably wrap up. Anyone have any final thoughts about the legends of the Nightfort and the coming importance in A Song of Ice and Fire?
I'm sorry, one more thing about the Black Gate. What do you all think the tier signifies when they pass between? I know, Beth, you made an excellent comment about it, the parallel between the two chapters, but what does the tier parallel? What does it mean?
Transition, sacrifice. That's what I take away from it.
It's salty like a tear, clearly for Azor Ahai.
Just throw some bacon in there and it'll be reborn amid salt and smoke.
Yep.
I got nothing on what the tier means.
Yeah. Yeah, I like both those. I think that also it could be the old gods kind of weeping for Bran and his party. Many of these people are not going to come back. And if they do, they're going to be completely different. I mean, perhaps that's kind of that time and space Bran where he sees all things, or the Three-Eyed Raven sees all things. It could be that. I'm not sure. But I do like that Bran is also an Azor Ahai like figure. And so I think that could be a bit of imagery around him.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, unless there are any further thoughts from the panelists.
I just want to end out by saying the Nightfort is the end of the world. I believe that if the wall is going to fall, it's going to fall from
there.
That's my take.
I think that's a good take. Oh, Chase, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to emphasize it again. The end of the world.
Yes.
End of the world. Yes.
The end of the world. You heard it here 4 times. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to listen to the creepy Legends of the Nightfort panel. We are so glad you joined us for this creepy early afternoon, late morning show. And can't wait to find out with the rest of you what happens at the Nightfort. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Tara.
Thank you. Thank you to Ice and Fire Con for letting us
doing this today, for being the last panel of the weekend. Hi, everyone. This is what I look like on like 4 hours of sleep with no. You're used to, if you've been to Ice and Fire Con, you will have seen me look like this before. So Also, dog mom shirt, dogs being obnoxious in the background. Thank you guys. This was a really great discussion. And I do, sorry, tired. I do want to say that Chloe and I have been talking, and I think we're going to try to do some things like this, like once a month or so, like a webcast with, ISNBuyerCon, family members, attendees, fandom faves, whatever, just kind of discussing the books in the show to keep things alive between now and October. So we've got some good ideas that came out of this weekend, and just thank you again for being part of it. And also,
Thank you.
Watched everything. Like, honestly, we had so many great conversations in the live chats and everything. It's been a great weekend. I wish we were all in Ohio, but this was, I guess, second best.
Where we should be.
All right, guys, and you guys are all set. Do you guys have any last words before I end this?
Stay safe.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Stay sane.
Yeah,
Guys.
stay inside. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Don't touch your faces. We do want this to happen in October, so do all those things and more. All right, thank you guys. Have a wonderful Sunday.
Bye all.
See ya.